Good evening, everyone, to the 2021 Magic City Poetry Festival. I'm Elamar Wilson, Vice President of the Board for the festival, and tonight we're here for Poets in Conversation featuring Khalisa Rae and Rachel Eliza Griffiths. We're so glad you could be here to see these two poets share work and wisdom. We'd also like to thank our sponsor, PEN America, and the PEN Birmingham chapter. We'd also like to thank all who have donated individually to our efforts. If you'd like to support our mission to deliver free and accessible poetry programming to the greater Birmingham area and beyond, you can donate via our website, that's www.magiccitypoetryfestival.org, where you can find links to our programming for this month and previous festivals. Thank you to the Magic City Poetry Festival Board, our esteemed president, Ashley Jones, and other board members, Laura Secord, Alina Stefanescu, Shantika Curry, and Monique Jones. We'd also like to thank all of our featured artists for this month's festival, and you can find the calendar on our website. Of course, registration is always free. We hope to see you throughout the month. You can purchase both poets' books from the official bookstore of the Magic City Poetry Festival, Thank You Books, which is a staple in the Birmingham literary community. We're so proud to partner with this independent, woman-owned bookstore. You can find their bookstore, their website, which will be linked in the chat, to purchase all festival books, whether you're near or far. They deliver. And if you're in town, or when you're in town, after you've been vaccinated and you can safely travel, they also offer contact-free book pickup of online orders. Tonight, we'll witness a reading and conversation by poets Khalisa Rae and Rachel Eliza Griffiths. After my brief introduction, they'll go into a 30-minute conversation-style reading, followed by a more traditional Q&A. Please feel free to leave some questions in the Facebook comments or by using the Q&A feature if you're joining us by Zoom. The chat also will be open throughout the event, so feel free to write affirmations and reactions to the poems there. Just be aware, any hate speech or inflammatory comments will be cause for immediate removal. For those who might be here who are visually impaired, I would just briefly describe myself before I introduce the poets. I'm a black man, brown skin with locks. I'm wearing this sweater and I'm sitting in this chair that has a lattice, lattice embroidered wood. And as I introduce the poets, I'll also invite them to, describe themselves and make themselves known to those who may have visual impairment. Now on to the poets. Khalisa Rae is a poet, activist, and journalist living in Durham, North Carolina. She is the author of the chapbook Real Girls Have Real Problems. Her poetry can be seen in Frontier, Rust and Moth, Damaged Goods, Hellebore, Flypaper, Sundog Lit, PANK, Luna Luna, Tishman Review, Occulum, All Female Menu, Obsidian, among other journals. She's the winner of the Bright Wings Poetry Contest, the Furious Flower, Gwendolyn Brooks Poetry Prize, the White Stag Publishing Contest, among others. Currently, she serves as the founder of Think in Ink, BIPOC Collective, and the Women of Color Speak reading series. Her debut collection, which we're kind of celebrating tonight, Ghost in a Black Girl's Throat, is out with Red Hen Press, I believe, next week. I know I've pre-ordered and I'm waiting for my copy. And White Stag will release Unlearning Eden, her next collection, next January. Rachel Eliza Griffiths is a poet, novelist, and photographer. Her most recent book, Seeing the Body, which came out with Norton in 2020, was nominated for this year's NAACP Image Award in Outstanding Literary Works. Griffiths' visual and literary work has appeared widely, including in the New York Times, the New Yorker, the Paris Review, New York Review of Books, Los Angeles Review of Books, Miss Magazine, the Kenyon Review, and many other places. She is the recipient of fellowships from a host of esteemed grantors, including the Robert Rauschenberg Foundation, Cave Canem Foundation, Cambilio, and Yaddo. Her debut novel, Promise, is forthcoming from Random House, and Griffiths lives in New York City. Let's welcome Khalisa Rae and Rachel Eliza, and I'll see you on the other side for the Q&A.
Hello. Oh my goodness. It's so good to see you.
It's so good to see you too. I didn't know if I was muting myself or what I was doing. Congratulations. I'm so glad to read with you in advance of your book.
Thank you so, I mean, I'm gonna tell you, I am 2 seconds away from just having a conniption. So you'll just have to excuse me because to be here with you is just a dream. Thank you so much. And you too, likewise. I am like on the edge of my seat waiting to get my hands on all your forthcoming work. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Of course. So
we're talking and we're sharing
yeah.
poems
So
and
my first inclination was that I think we should read a little. I was just looking over the poems that you sent me, and many of them I have meditated on before. Some I hadn't spent time with, and so it was such a pleasure and a joy because we talked before this about place and how place informed the crafting of our pieces. And I noticed about the pieces that you sent me, the characters or the people in your pieces are always somewhere doing something. They're always in a place doing something with action. And so I thought maybe, and you can tell me if you want to go a different way, but I thought maybe we could open with a piece of yours and then talk and I can respond to it. I chose pieces of mine that I felt responded well to yours, but you tell me what you're thinking.
I think, I like the idea of us being in conversation with our poems and that we kind of get to vibe out and have it feel as natural as it would feel if we were in person.
Yeah.
And I like what you were saying about the idea of place,
Mm.
uh, because I feel like that is very central to my identity across every number of genres. I think I have an echo. Is that me or is that?
A little bit. I can go on mute.
No, is that? Oh, I don't. Is that? I think it might be better, but yeah, I think. Okay, so one of us does. So I'll start off and read a poem, and then if you will read a poem too, and then we'll talk about both of our poems, and then we could dance toward the next poem, right? So this is my book, Seeing the Body. It came out during the pandemic. We're giving birth to books in the pandemic, and this book was born kind of 6 months ago, not 6 months ago, 6 years ago, with the death of my mother and the kind of grief of that relationship, but then the transformation of my own identity into something else, which happens often with grief. But also, I wanted to celebrate my mother. I think I'll read this title poem, and I think it's in a way, a landscape for seeing the body. One of the things that was really critical to me when I was thinking about these poems of like, after you lose someone as significant as a parent, how do you kind of wander in the world and keep yourself grounded and rooted to the things in you that you can keep, but also how do you use your rootedness to let go of things as well? And I think that can be a kind of superpower in the process of grieving. So this poem is called Seeing the Body. Seeing the body. She died, and in the spring of her blood, I remember my mother's first injury, surprise of unborn petals curling red, then dark around her wrist. Some fruit she cut, some onion, some body with skin and sharp seeds. She fed me. She lived us and I. She held we and I. She kept speaking with those flowers falling from her blood, taking her across the sky to death. I remember her voice like a horn I never want to pull out of my heart. In the next life, which is here and here, I gather every mouth that ever sang my mother's blues. She burned and she talked back hard at God. Oh, my mother, she danced unbroken too, bale of grief on my back, opening into something black I wear, a life of flesh, like a petal or fruit or burning. I've carried everything, and I'm tired. My mother survived, and but she did not live. She told me nothing, and she was waiting the entire time. How does the elegy believe me? Together we crossed the sky. There was a gate, and we walked through the world like that. She wrote we and I. She was last or never seen, and brown eyes without life, opened her eternity when the air in her stopped, and she was last seen dying. She was too silent for the first time in her life. The spring of my mother's blood, hot and God, the dark, dark beyond the closed door that won't move again. Thank you.
Yeah, so good.
I would love to hear a poem from you.
Yeah, I have a poem in response to that, but I did want to ask you a question before I read mine. One of the things that I was taken with when I was reading this poem for the first time was the fact that there's the repetition of the I and I being left unsaid. Um, and I guess I wanted to ask, as I think about my own work and Ghost in the Black Girl's Throat, because that's a lot of what I intended to do with the book, to talk about all the things we never say. I would love to just know your intention behind the repetition there, and what did you intend for the impact of that to be?
I think in the beginning when this was the last poem that I wrote in the book. It was the hardest. Like I had pieces of it and it would just kind of hang in space. It felt like this formation around the book. And then finally, by the time I felt that the book was complete, I kind of let myself, like my guards down, and let this this poem is like resembles no other poem that I've ever written. And I think there's a reason for that. But I think there's some kind of intuition in this poem that knows more about that kind of silence, and that the way that grief can mute us, or just kind of stop us, or give us this space to kind of fall apart. And I love the title of your book. I mean, it's just so evocative, provocative, and it's just stunning to me. Like I hear it. I remember when I first saw, I was like, who is this? What's this? Ooh, I was just so drawn to that kind of language. And I think it's, for both of us, maybe that visceral sense of utterance, just completely like the windpipe being cut off. And in a way, the language is separated from the breath, and what you have is the body. And then how do you see that body? How do you offer it to others? And then how do you claim it for yourself because it's yours? So I had a lot of claiming of bodies, including my own, that was part of my work in my grieving. So that's what I would say for now.
Yeah, I could feel that in the piece. And I wanted to read Morning Sickness because I felt that in your poem. You said the silencing that grief brings. And for me, a lot of my book is about the silencing of trauma, of being a Black woman in the South, as I'm sure you know all too well, how that can be a robbing of your voice. Because I migrated to the South from Gary, Indiana. And so it was a bit of a, with the breath of like, whoa, like this is what my ancestors talked about, right? But also I'm not allowed to talk about what's going on here. So I wrote this poem for my husband because we did meet in the South, and he's a Southern boy, and the fear of losing him. And I felt like this was a good conversation piece for seeing the body, because it's almost the fear of grief, not actually going through it, but the fear that it's inevitable. As a Black man, he will soon, one day, might lose his life in a Southern street. And so I wanted to read Morning Sickness. Morning Sickness. Every time my husband walks outside, I am afraid someone will make him asphalt, and I will be the widow mourning. In the morning, going to view the due of the body they stole from me. No one ever gets their just due. How we know the suspect caught will get off and fly the coop, go back to the streets to find someone else to send back to dust. A day crescendo of earth. The ground song we knew is gone. Just like the sky we were aiming for was a reflection, and we were all diving into empty swimming pools, each of us coming back as crows that fade too fast for them to catch us. At night, I listen for the sound of my husband's disappearing, wait for the officer's pound at my door. This blackness is a death sentence and inevitable, sorry for your loss. Mouth gaping, eyes closed, hands waving from the vibration of names turned to headline. A hymnal of hurt and healing, settled in lungs that can't rest.
Thank you. I mean, that's a hymnal of hurt and healing. I mean, that's it makes me think when you're describing the South, I see definitely a bridge for us. As far as, I was down in Oxford, Mississippi, working on photographs when, I got this kind of understanding that my mother had actually like stopped speaking, which is also kind of silence from her illness. And the nurse in this hospital in Philadelphia, I grew up in Wilmington, Delaware, born in DC, and I'm in Delaware, and it's really powerful to me to share this evening with you and to know that just like 15 minutes away is my mother's headstone and where she is at rest. But that I traveled from Mississippi, from the deep South where I had been in Mississippi and Georgia and been spending time down there doing work, to back north to Philadelphia. And within hours, like my whole world was shattered. And I think this wise thing that you said about this fear of that kind of grief and how to come through it. I don't feel like I've come through it because I think it's a different kind of journey. Like there's not a destination or like a marker, like here it's final and it's finite or something. But this lovely phrase you said of Blackness, is it a death sentence, and how I feel like we both in our work resist that and offer complexity and love. This poem about your husband, there's the fear of grief, but there's also like this surge of love I felt after hearing you read it. And like, even in that fear, the love feels stronger than that fear. And I really appreciate that courage in the poem for sure.
Thank you. Yeah, that's interesting that you said that you felt the love. It's almost, it mirrors this, it's so funny because at all times I have this fear and love of the South at all times. It's like this dichotomy of beauty and pain always, because it's, as you know, it's aesthetically gorgeous all the time, most of the year. It's gorgeous, but you walk around in fear as a person of color often. Fear for your loved ones, fear for yourself, and that pain that you carry around brings that sadness, but there is that love, because I've been here for almost 16 years. I can't even really say that I'm from the Midwest because I came to Wilmington, North Carolina, which is interesting. We have so much in common. So I used to say, hey, I'm going to college in Wilmington, and people would be like, Delaware? And I'd be like, no, I'm going to North Carolina. And they're like, why would you go to North Carolina from Indiana, from outside Chicago? And so I am of this place now for 14 plus years. I've been here. So there is a love and a hate. There's that warring feeling that I have at all times. So it's interesting that you picked up on also that love in this poem, because I do love him dearly. He's connected to the South, but also there's that fear and that pain at all times. So yeah.
Khalisa, will you read us another poem?
I can, for sure.
I would love that, actually.
Yeah, sure, I can do that. So in my mind, it's funny because I was reading your poem, Good Mother, and many of the poems in my book talk about family and how I carried a lot of family trauma with me to the South. And it's interesting when you have compounding trauma. It's like you came to a place with trauma. And so it's stacked against you. And we were talking about grief, and it's like grief on top of grief. And so when I read Good Mother, I chose a poem to respond to that too. In my head, you were going to read that next. But I wrote this poem reclaiming our phenomenal bones. And when I was looking at your piece, I felt like it was a celebration of the many types of motherhood. And I wanted to read Reclaiming Our Phenomenal Bones because for me, I needed to write this poem to start to heal those wounds of trauma that I had as a child. So this is Reclaiming Our Phenomenal Bones. When did we lose our phenomenal? I think we left it on the back stoop, abandoned it like a baby on steps for anyone to pick up and call their own. I think we tucked it under our tongues, let it dissolve and melt away, but the taste of it still lingers. I think we spread our phenomenal across beds in the backs of cars where we opened it for anyone who said the magic word. I think we smeared it on countertops and couches, made it like a jam or marmalade to smear, lick off for satisfaction. But women, you have been phenomenal and everlasting since the beginning of time, since the Nile and cradle of civilization. And Lucy, your phenomenal bones are proof that you were once here and breathing and everything. Our brown bosoms have brought nations to their knees. Our opened mouths have made even the most powerful cower. Our brick and mortar skin has always been a phenomenal destination. Brownstone thighs, crafted cathedrals of a waist, sweltering temple lips, a museum of a mind. You will find our phenomenal when we stop looking and just be.
I feel like this is an anthem. Love to hear it. I truly do. Oh my God, I love that poem. Thank you so much. I mean, there was just so many moments and I was like, okay, wow. Like it's just, the language is so specific. And then it's so tactile. I think that's really beautiful. That's amazing. And I'm trying to go back. There was something you said. I've been swept up now with the poem, but I'm trying to think. There was something that you were saying just before you started to read. It will come back to my senior brain in a minute, but it felt like another link. I think between our energy, our connection, there was something you were saying about trauma and family and coming, arriving. There was a phrase in your first poem called the ground song. And I'm holding on to that phrase because I feel like a lot of the poems and seeing the body is that kind of ground song, like listening to the earth, but then like the earth within as well. And this celebration in some way of like the battle scars, but also the beauty, the brownstone, the thighs, the lip, just all of that. I'm like I'm all about it. I'm always for the culture. So thank you for that. And I think, when I'm thinking about certain kinds of grief that, I know for seeing the body, it was like, I wanted to be sure to put in joy and I wanted to be clear, like that the full spectrum of grief, or my spectrum, because I wouldn't speak for anyone else's spectrum of grief and how that happens, but just to have those moments of celebration, and to have those moments of, you know, this like almost like wonder, or sometimes even guilt, like I'm alive, I'm here, and what do I deserve? And having the strength to not let others dictate to tell you or tell us what we deserve, especially as Black women, but also to believe that we are worthy, and that our lives matter, and that our, you know, our bodies are central, and not, you know, just sites of labor for other people, including this American history. So, you know, I'm just really thinking about these things as I'm listening to you talk about your intentions with your poems, and just different things you're thinking about with the South. I could read Good Mother, or I could read a different poem.
Whatever you'd like.
I'm gonna, before, I think I will read Good Mother if there's, when we have time, but I wanted to read this poem, Ars Poetica. Actually in conversation with the poem that you just read, but at an earlier stage in my own identity and kind of coming of age. And I think I'm reading it because I am thinking of the trauma in my own life as a sexual assault survivor, that in this book, I kind of had to come clean with myself and to speak, right? To like that kind of fist at the back of my throat, like to repel it, and to open up those fingers and realize that some of the fingers in my own throat were my own fingers, you know? So this poem is called Ars Poetica. And I think what I need to tell you is, when I was growing up, my mother was diagnosed with renal failure, with kidney failure. And so she didn't have dialysis. She had this other kind of dialysis, alternative dialysis, which will be mentioned in the poem. So it's kind of it's like slightly medical, but I just want to say that so that people who are joining us, which thank you for joining us and celebrating and having this conversation with us, I just want you to know that. Ars Poetica. In the evenings, we watched Jeopardy, wore surgical masks once she got sick. Before that, my mother often sent me to the store for cigarettes, packs of Salem Lights. Take somebody with you, she'd tell me, but I didn't listen. Only wanted to get back to the book on my lap. Didn't want to share the change with my siblings so I could buy chips, grape now-laters, and red Huggy barrels for myself. We microwaved fluid in clear bags for her exchanges. That's what the word meant. When my mother connected the plastic tube from her stomach to a piss-colored sack of peritoneal fluid. Normal dialysis was too much. Before all that, my mother smoked. We would drive late to liquor stores for boxed wine, 6 packs. Then she got on the phone with her friends, kept her feet up on an open oven to stay warm. Laughed the laughs she needed to help her get by, get up the next day, and mother us all over again. At night, she did what she wanted, cursed so sublimely, I learned to hear it as poetry, unless I was the beloved of her ode. Before she got sick, around the age I am now, she wore her hair short, dyed a color I can only describe as fuck you red. She'd smoke wearing her pearls, ask me about school and what did I want to be, because she figured it likely cost her a lot of money. Sometimes she'd say, Rachel face, I need you to go to the store. I'd put down my book or the knife on the cutting board. I'd walk alone in ugly jeans and Coke bottle glasses to Concord Deli, thinking about whether I could be a writer someday. If I would ever learn to smoke, curse, and two-step against a hot stove while my children grew up like books or strangers under my own roof. What would it cost me to make up true stories. How much would I have to save of my life to pay my own way? When my neighbor said, "Hey, beautiful," I was thinking of how to get out of doing the dishes. Besides, I didn't reply because I wasn't beautiful. But his friend braked hard, barking like a dog while he jumped from the car and ran over our shadows on the sidewalk. "Hey, bitch," he said, and flicked his cigarette down where we were both dark as asphalt. The memory shivered in the skillet, the way the onions did when I came back into the kitchen with my mother's cigarettes, put the book away, and picked up the knife.
I love that ending so much.
I was thinking of, I remembered in the middle of reading the poem, Khalisa, that what you were saying about, being in the South, and I think maybe in many different communities, particularly Black communities, of like what happens in the house stays in the house. And that house may be your body, but it may be the house. Yes. And that, there are a lot of phrases. I just suddenly thought of "bless her heart," or, different things I heard growing up where there was always this code. And, sometimes that code I felt maybe became shrapnel that blew up in my face, or that I kind of swallowed that language, and then it imploded inside of me and no one knew what was happening inside, and who had time for you to say, "Hey, something's going on here." Because people just talked about paying bills and having to go to work and take care of a family. So I really empathized. I really felt, I don't want to say empathy, I really felt what you were saying as far as bringing that up. And I think it's an important thing to acknowledge and I don't know, to speak to it, to open up that throat and to pull out the words, the memory and the history, let it all be there,
Do you want to know something interesting about you saying what you thought about was what happens in the home stays in the home? That is literally exactly what I was thinking when I read your piece, and also the poem that I chose to respond to that with is all about that. My mom just told me that my grandmother, because she's at the end of her life and she's been recalling memories that she didn't tell anyone. And when I read your poem, I was really honing in on the fact that you kept bringing up pieces or facets of your mother the way she was. She smoked, she cursed, she wrote this "F you lipstick." And I loved those central details so much, those textural details so much. But the thing that really drew me in was it reminded me of a conversation I had just had with my mother about my grandmother slowly, she has dementia, and she's slowly revealing things about herself. She used to go out and party and wear lipstick and dress up. And she even revealed that, she had all these boyfriends that we never knew about. And so it was just really interesting to think about this other life, if you will. And so I wrote this poem, "My Grandmother Never Spoke About Her Body." And my mom, do you know that my mom told me the other day on the phone, she said, "You're wrong. Your grandmother does speak about her body now. She does." So all of that, don't talk about it, as you said, hush, hush. We don't speak about, affairs and partying and men and things that are, we keep those pushed down. She now, isn't that interesting that the closer she gets to the end of her life, she's just like, I'm free now to talk about those things. So yeah, I just thought that was so interesting. If I could, I would love to read that poem for you. But were you going to say something? I don't want to cut you off.
No. I just want to say so quickly that a very similar thing happened to my mother when her illness got really kind of serious and we were worried. She just started to let it all hang out, and it was just glorious. And I'm grateful for the things in the women from which we come from and whose lineage we carry, that they trust our love and that they felt safe and feel prepared to just say, "This is who I was," and let us see them. And I would love to hear your poem.
All right, let me pull that up. So this is called My Grandmother Never Spoke About the Body, but now we know that that's not necessarily true. She's speaking now, which is amazing. In my dream, she is under a man that knows about satisfaction and indulgence, a giver and a pleaser, one that doesn't hand over the chocolate, but rubs the morsels of his lips, leans his limbs down to the center of his mouth and says, here, the center of her mouth, and says, here, take. In my dream, I came from pleasure, from men that believed the arc in her back was medicine for aching, aging hands, that foreplay cures cataracts better than THC, and all good pipes burst when tapped at the right place. In my dream, she is body embraced and thirsting for more. She is gushing, knowing dying in ecstasy would be a sweet death, that anticipation is the realest form of feminism there is.
That's perfect. I mean, and those lines too. I mean, that feels like it's speaking, but then it also has that kind of Southern energy too of saying like 6 different things with just the image. I love that. Like that. I think that's so beautiful when that happens in a poem, because you can just keep coming back and you're like, oh, it's this today or it's that. You know, that's beautiful. I think I'm not sure. I will apologize because it's hard for me to look at the chat and it's moving and then be like, wait, what time is it? What are we doing? But I could read another poem or we could open it up or.
We have, I think she said at maybe the 7:40 mark.
Okay.
So I think she said that you're good to read one more and then I think we're opening up for questions.
Okay, great. So I think I would like to read the Good Mother poem. I'll close with that. And then I'm excited for more conversation because I just feel like I love that thing that happens where it's like all this time we've been kind of coming toward each other and then the alignment is just there and it just feels organic and I never take that for granted. So I just want to say thank you for inviting me to join you as we begin to celebrate you and your work. And it is work, but it also is living too. So I want to praise that. And so I'm reading this Good Mother poem, and it is exactly about that. It's a kind of praise song, a ground song and a praise song. Good Mother. Let's put it up here where I can see. Praise the woman who took me in her arms and wouldn't let go of me. We sank to the floor in the middle of the Rite Aid, of the aisle in Rite Aid. It was a late morning, and I walked slowly, furious that spring could still be so wonderful. Magnolia tempted me to forget about my mother for a few minutes. I stared at a Brooklyn blue sky through branches clasping pear blossoms. The limbs shook in sunlight. My eyes adjusted when I went into the pharmacy and realized everywhere I looked, the world announced it would soon be Mother's Day. Something ripped itself out of me, a howl so wide I thought I would burst. The woman near the counter understood right away, the way my mother once understood I had been born in a specific sadness. The woman did not say she was a mother, but I knew it. She put her arms around me and waved away the cashiers, the security guard who repeated, "Ma'am, ma'am." A stranger rocked me in her arms, so much kindness as we fell over and crashed against a row of votive candles. She didn't say it would be okay. She didn't ask me what was wrong, but her arms put me in a vicious prayer. I almost bit her, almost pushed her away. We held on and praised the nameless thing that makes us what we think we aren't strong enough to know. She knew. She didn't let go of me. Praise the woman who didn't wipe my snot from her shirt, my tears from her collarbone, who did not tell me to pull myself together while everything inside me dropped. Crushed bones, blossoms pushing through my mouth, a word, mom, mom, mom. This broken bird song of mine, with no bird, no wing, no way to fly back through time. Praise the woman who did not leave me like something suddenly dead on the sidewalk with the breeze blowing over its face. Praise the woman who smelled like fabric softener and coffee and the good things I must believe I am too. Praise the mothers who walk slowly through the world, bringing children into themselves, burying children sometimes before themselves, and who defend something harder than innocence. Praise the guts and grace of mothers. Praise their exhaustion and their good work. Praise their wit, their wonderful ways of listening to the world fall asleep against its clean pillow. For the woman who knelt with me in an ugly heap in the middle of Rite Aid on an unbearable spring day, who helped me buy a Mother's Day card for my dead mother who knew better than to say I'd be just fine. For you, I lift my arms each spring and wish you a kindness so fantastic I sometimes feel I'm in midair, the shadow of my wings clapping in joy above your children who must love you. Thank you. So,
I love that so much.
thank you. And I was thinking like it's springtime again, and just last spring it was the pandemic, but this kind of contrast again of like nature, like the natural world with trauma and grief and the silence of the actual world of where we were. I remembered last spring going in, out on the sidewalk in New York and standing there and all these beautiful magnolia and cherry blossoms, and it's all blowing around like all this beautiful pink petals, and like few blocks away there's like a mobile morgue of bodies. And it's like this trauma, I don't even know, I might be the age of a grandmother by the time I'm able to say what that is or what that means or how that's altered me, because I know I'm not the same,
Yeah, well, it goes back to what we were just talking about that beauty and that pain. My husband says on the day that his grandmother passed, it was such a beautiful day. He said that like everybody was skipping and the flowers were blooming and the sun was out and it was so gorgeous. And he was like, something's not right. Like he felt like there was something wrong that day. But it also reminds me of that dichotomy just about the grief of being in the South and it being so gorgeous with the beautiful flowers and the pastures. And I speak to that a lot in my work as well. Just how it's hard to contend with that grief and that trauma when everything around you looks so beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, goodness, first of all, just to say thank you both for that beautiful reading conversation. Um, I wanted to bring up the two questions that are in the chat and to intersect with them some questions that we got elsewise. The first question, which I think is for both of you, and this really gets at the last two poems that you read. I feel like a smile in your poems, even when there's something very hard and very difficult. There's always something, and I think this is so true of Black women poets. They find a way, whether it's a guffaw, like a serious deep laugh, or like just a smile where it's like, or there's something underneath these poems that that are suffused with so much grief where there's some joy. So, Sir Dricia, I think that's how, forgive me, Sir Dricia, if I don't have your name right, asked this question, and I'm going to suffuse it with that. Who inspired you to find a way to do that in your poems? Like, what poets, thinking of the lineage of poets that you come from, who made it clear to you that no matter what I do, even in naming grief, I want there to be some kind of hope or smile, or even in uttering the despair. I don't know if that resonates or makes sense for you, but who do you see as central to you in the formation of who you are as a poet, and trying to do that in your work?
I will say quickly, and I'll tell a story, and I don't know, Lamar, if you will remember it, because I feel like I'm going back to Cave Canem 2006. I don't know if I met you at Cave Canem that year, but I feel like you were there in spirit.
I didn't arrive until 2008, but I think I know this story because I think you've told it to me. So I feel like I was there because I've heard this. I think I know the story, but I wish I were there because I think I know what happened, but go ahead.
I think I don't want to take up all the time telling, I'm on the porch in a way. Khalisa and I, you got the porch chair. I got to get my game together so I can when I grow up, I need this chair. But I was just going to say that I often think about 2006 and like coming into Cave Canem and thinking about Lucille Clifton and Rita Dove being the guest poets, and Toy Derricott and Elizabeth Alexander and Patricia Smith. And so I feel their energy often with me at the table. I particularly hear Miss Lucille's laughter, because she would read something hard, and then like that laughter of hers, it would just go through you. It literally was like water, and water is, in her new collected that is edited by my sister poet Aris Daly's Garmai, How to Carry Water. So I definitely hear Miss Lucille's energy as I lost my mother, and also like some of the things of like the kidney failure and like the body, the trauma of the body and healing. And so I think of her right now as I always think of Gwendolyn Brooks as well, but I'm thinking of someone who was in my life in a way that I have muscle memory of her. And then I will tell the story another time, but she did ask me to read her poem, which I've told you about. Did I tell you? Yeah. So I'm not going to get into all that, especially in a Zoom room. But yeah, that's like the porch time with the potato salad and all that. So I'll tell Khalisa another time when we're on the porch. What would you say, Khalisa, for you?
I'm ready for that story. We'll have, offline. I will echo several folks that you've mentioned, but I also, in writing my book, I read a lot of Toni Morrison. I sat with her because, we didn't really get into this. We started the cusp of it with our like poems before the last one, especially my grandmother never spoke about her body, because, I am a survivor of sexual assault as well. And I just kept coming back to Toni's work because there's always that dichotomy of trauma, body, family, pain, sex, identity, but yet there's always a lightness to her work as well. And so I just kept being drawn back in and found myself in conversation with Toni Morrison a lot. Gwendolyn Brooks too. I would obsessively like read her poetry before I would sit down to write. And much of this came from my MFA program with Claudia Rankin. And so she would give me people that echoed Toni or like that, or Gwendolyn or Lucille, to read as homework, because she knew I needed all of those things to be speaking to each other with that lightness and with that joy, because that's also, I think, just a part of my innate personality. I wonder if that's our personalities as well, that we as people smile through the pain. I've been often told that I just like, yeah, I'm fine. Like, yeah, I'm pushing, I'm in there. And I wonder if, this is not a famous author, but I wonder if ancestrally too, that's something that I picked up from my ancestors as well. As I write, I'm in conversation with them because my mom, I'll be like, how are you? Knowing that she's carrying 60 different pieces of baggage, smiling through that. So yeah.
No, that when you said Miss Toni Morrison, I'm just like, okay. And then Claudia was I studied with Claudia at Cave Canem, I think at least for two of my visits there. She's wonderful. But gosh, I'm so old. It doesn't crack. Let's see. My third book of poetry, Mule and Pear, was dedicated to Toni Morrison and Zora Neale Hurston. And I was fortunate enough to give Mule and Pear in person to Toni Morrison. And she wrote me. And thank God she really loved my book, because it changed. I think for me, when maybe I might have given up at that point and just said, this kind of work, I'm not going to make it. That letter arriving from her, about poems I wrote about characters from her books. And I was like, okay, I got to get up and show up. Right. But that's the kind of thing where, it's like, I never leave her. It's like, it's really strange when she passed away. She passed away like the day my mother was buried. It's like there are days between. So it's like my literary mother and then my biological mother within like 2 years of each other. And so I carry Toni Morrison around so deeply. And so to hear you place her name into our conversation brings me so much joy. And I'm thinking again of a little story where there was an event. I think, Lamar, you were definitely at this. Was it that Nikki Giovanni had?
Yeah, the tribute. Yeah, where we all
At Virginia Tech, and it was celebrating Maya Angelou and Toni Morrison, and there's all these Nikki Finney and
Nikki Finney, Mari Evans, everybody was there.
It was great. And I remember coming into this room and I was afraid to come through the door. And so, I'm standing at the door and I'm thinking like, how can I come into this room? And I remember Edwidge Dandaka saw me standing out in the hallway looking like baby poet. And she's like, come in here and get a plate. And I was, and Jericho Brown's laugh was in there, and I knew that. And so I walked through that door and there was Rita Duff putting on bright electric blue eyeshadow, picking out her hair. I was like, oh, I'm home. There's Angela Davis. There's Toni Morrison. And I just thought, these women, like, I'm enough. I can come through this door and I'm enough. I don't have to write I don't have to do anything but live. And like, this is the Sister Sonia. It was just so beautiful. So beautiful. It's like, I feel having conversations and celebrating each other, like we're doing, like smiling, talking about the trauma, but we're not defined either by it. Like we can be, as Elizabeth Alexander says, many things at once, many things are true at once. And so, I remember photographing Miss Lucille for a portrait, and she asked to hear Billie Holiday. Billie Holiday has some hard songs and a hard life, but she was singing these songs and she was smiling and her eyes were aglow. And someone asked her, who are you singing to, Miss Lucille? And she said, I don't even hear y'all. I'm singing to my husband, Fred. I was like, okay. Like, it's just these kind of moments, that I hold on to them, because we all know the solitude and the moments and the anxieties, and our world is different than their world. And yet there is, like you said, Khalisa, lineage, ancestors. I think that's right.
Yes. Oh my goodness, I need to hear all of these stories with these greats. Like, I just need to sit with you and you need to just tell me all this tea with the greats.
The memoir.
I'd love to do it.
We're ready for the memoir. That's what we're saying, Rachel Eliza. We're ready for the memoir.
Oh no, honey, I need to be in the world. I can't. It's too young.
If Angela Davis could write her memoir at like 20, and Nikki Giovanni wrote her memoir at like 25, you can do it, my dear. There's another cute question before I let you all maybe ask each other some questions, and I have others too. But we have a question from Arnaldo, who says, specifically to Rachel, what is your first step? You're a multimedia artist, right? You do photography, you work in film, you think, I think, almost visually as much as you do with the words. And so they're asking, what is your first step, the visual or the written? How do you open to the possibilities that end up on the page and through your eyes in your voice? How do you do that in poetry?
Just thank you for the question. I appreciate it. And I think it's always a fluid process to me. Like sometimes I start a poem and it just really is just the language on the page, although that's highly visual for me. And then other times I can be very experimental where I'll try a line visually before I actually put it on paper, or it's like putting it in like 3 different forms, like a shapeshifter, and then seeing like what is going to be the strongest body for that emotion or instinct. And so sometimes I will put it in I'll put like the feeling or the grief, or it's an elegy. Maybe it's better as a photograph versus it being a poem, but I have to try all those things. So I get to fail a lot, which is fun, but it helps me to keep things kind of in like fluid draft, keep the muscles like kind of warm, and being like, sometimes we can start poems and get really fixed and hold on to the language and hold on to our stanzas, and we don't want to like unstitch it and like open it up and rip it open. But for me, that is like a lot of the process for me. But I don't have like a standard practice, but I usually will always try a visual form, like a language and text thing, whatever it is. Even like for my novel, I have maps and drawings and photographs and things of the landscape, like a whole wall of it. I think, and obviously seeing the body, if you check it out, I allowed like my identity as a photographer to just be messy, like let it all just be messy and come in together for the first time. And so the book feels whole in a way that I haven't experienced before with my identity as a poet. So that's what I would say.
I'm not sure where Lamar went.
Oh no.
Hi.
Oh, okay.
Computer started to die, so I had to move from the fabulous chair I was teaching before this. So I've been like on the computer for like 5 hours straight. I wanted to bring up a question that I think is connected about sound. I loved how you come alive when you perform your poems, Khalisa Rae, and so I wanted to know like how sound informs what you put on the page, and how, coming from the performative space to the page, how you match those two things. And then with the time that we have left, I would love if we could just end with some kind of poem in the air or something from the both of you. I don't know. I know we were supposed to end precisely at 9, but we started a little bit later, so I think we should be okay if we went through that. All right, Khalisa Rae.
Sure, I can answer briefly then, so we can get a poem in at the end. For me, because I started on the stage, so from a young girl, my parents put me on the stage. And so for me, the sound comes first. It's funny that we brought up Nikki Finney, because I actually feel like I learned that from her first. She has this scene about like the kids rolling in the bed. I don't know if you remember that scene from her poem, because they packed together in the bed. And for me, when I go to craft, I think about the sound of that, not just literally audibly, but the sound of children packed together. So the P of the pack and the punch that would hit when I said it on stage, rolling, and what I would do with my body and the sound, because that's the world that I come from, the theatrical and the dramatic and the performative. And so I always start with that first. And that influences also how I organize as well on the page, because I want the sounds to be so rich and for you to leave on that rich sound. And I don't know if you could tell, but I also write sounds that feel good in my mouth and that make me feel good. Like when I read, you could see that my body's like vibing with it. So that's very important for me too, that it rests well in my body. So yeah.
I would just agree with Khalisa. Like, I feel like sound is so important to me as well, as much as image. It's like that space of the lyric, but that the rhythm, like that, will really like pull the breath through your body. But I love how you read. I mean, you just feel the poems, and it's embodiment. You know, even though some of the poems is like trauma or different things, but like it's just something gorgeous about it that I find really compelling. I just wanted to say that.
You.
Do either of you have a really brief poem that you could read so we could close out with that, and then we'll say goodnight and thank everyone? I'll just say my final thoughts, and then I'll let you all. Thanks to our readers, Rachel Eliza and Khalisa Rae, and to all of you for being here. Join us for our next event, the All Over Alabama Reading Series, featuring Dr. Jacqueline Trimble, Jason McCall, and Kimberly Casey, which will be on Sunday night, April 11th, this coming Sunday at 7 p.m. You can register at our website. And so I'll step out of the way and remove myself from the screen, and the last voices you will hear will be from Khalisa Rae and Rachel Eliza, who I both say thank you so much for allowing us to celebrate you down here in Birmingham and Magic City, and hopefully we'll be able to come together in person soon. So thanks for being with us, and thanks for everyone for being here. Have a good night, and we're going to end with them reading a poem. Good night. All right.
Thank you, everyone. I also wondered too if we could just, if Khalisa Rae, if you wanted to read, and I just I want you to, that would make me happy. That would be my poem.
Oh, because I was gonna say the same thing. Okay, well, I'll read. Let's see. Yeah. I'm gonna read this poem. I'm gonna read Tea Party at the Cemetery. I feel like it encompasses everything that we've talked about. Lamar talked about the hope through the pain. And so, this poem encompasses and embodies all of that. As a child and as a survivor that was ready to escape my home in Indiana, but there was still hope there. There was hope. So this is Tea Party at the Cemetery. We built a haunting in the silent spaces, buried a living thing in my childhood baby dolls and music box ballerinas splitting their limbs to stay in step. Dancing Bear books and ice skating rest on the shelves now, covered in dust, just wanting to rest. But the rot keeps them up. We buried a breathing thing here, a coffin for every memory we didn't dare dig up, spirits lurking around every pageant queen trophy, all the trinkets we used to convince her she was a girl, innocent girl, a jury box filled with 20 years of secrets, things no one dared to tell. This door has been locked and shut, a locket on the dresser to remind us that memories are best kept away and private. Photographs of me smiling, but wanting to shudder and run. No one could tell I was waiting for the day to escape the porcelain faces, the Minnie Mouse pink patterned sheets and curtains, the repetitive TV static and terror that only resides in my mind now. I remember my 17th birthday, how I was so ready to run free from the carousels and tutus, run away from the thought of home. I peeked inside my room for the last time before leaving. I could have sworn I saw them all dancing, drinking tea on the grave. Thank y'all so, 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 so very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
This was amazing. Thank you so much. We'll have to be in conversation again. We have to get together. Yes, let's do it. Thank you, Ashley and Lamar. This was a joy.
Thank you, Ashley and Lamar. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Peace and blessings.
Good night.
Good night.